All right. Hi, everybody. This is Judy Mark from Disability Voices United. We hope you're all doing well. We have a really humdinger of a presentation for you today, I guess would be the nicest way to describe it. Um, but before we do that, we have a couple of quick announcements. Yes, whichever one you share is perfect. Okay. So first, we want to tell you about we're going back to the Think Outside the Box series. We started it in February and then we took a several month break to focus on the Medicaid cuts, which, by the way, we still have not won, and happy to provide any updates to folks who are interested later on today. But we are going back to it. So, as you see on this flyer, we are going in the month of June. So, this month, it's always the fourth Wednesday at the same time as 4:30 to 6. It's a step-by-step training into the self-determination program. It is a beginner's training, but there's a lot of people in the program already who could use sort of a refresher course. So in June, we're going to be talking about person-centered planning. In July, we're going to be talking about budget development. In August, we're going to be talking about spending plan. In September, we're going to be talking about financial management services. And in October, we're going to be talking about the transitioning into the program. So it's a fourth Wednesday of every month. We hope you will join us. The other thing that we want to announce today is we're doing two big conferences in person this year. The first one will be in Oakland for Northern California. It will be Thursday, September 11th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. It will be at the California Endowment in Oakland. We are opening up registration on Monday. And even though it says the 15th, it's actually going to be June 16th that we're opening up registration, and we hope that you will all join us. In addition, we're going to be having another in-person conference on Wednesday, November 19th, at the California Endowment in Los Angeles. And we will be opening up registration for that one in a couple of months. So this is your opportunity to get together in person to talk about both the self-determination program and supported decision making, which we believe are interconnected in a very important way. And the conference we're calling Empowerment in Practice. So we hope that you can all join us, and you just make sure you're on our mailing list, and then you will definitely get the announcement about registration. Also, if any of you come from, you're an independent facilitator or you are an FMS. Yes, I'm looking at you, Elena Tiffany. If you're from an FMS or if you're from any other kind of service provider who would like to be a sponsor of our conference, we are looking for sponsors as well. And that registration will also open up on Monday. All right. So we will put so the pictures are going to be in the chat for the slides of the flyers. All right, so hopefully there's no more questions. And for those of you who just joined us, just a reminder to choose your language at the bottom of your screen using the globe icon. All right, so let us begin. Tina, why don't you introduce yourself before we get started?
Okay, my name is Tina Ewing Wilson, and I've been in the SDP for 23 years. A lot of people say, well, that's not possible, but it is. I was in the pilot project. I went in 2001. So I've been doing this a long time, and I work for DBO.
Thank you. Um, Yadir is asking in the chat if there's going to be a virtual component. There is not going to be a virtual participation component. However, we will be recording the panels, the full conference panels, and we'll be making those recordings available. But you won't be able to like actively participate during the day. And we will not be requiring masks. We will be following The guidance, actually, I'm not going to say for sure whether we're following what requiring masks. We will follow whatever guidance is required in the particular county where we will be having the conferences. Of course, we are a community where people are very can suffer very significant consequences of things like COVID and other diseases, and so we want to encourage folks to wear masks if they have reason to protect them, to have the extra protection. I can tell you, I wear masks in a lot of places. Um, so let us begin. So go ahead, Kaylee, and we will get started. All right. So what we're calling the meeting today is the principle of responsibility, securing the future of the self-determination program. And you will hear a lot of the reason why we are talking about this today as we are moving forward. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you.
The five principles of self-determination are freedom, which means I have the freedom to choose my supports, to live where I want to have the people in my life that I want in my life. Authority, which means I'm the boss and I have authority to make decisions, um, and make things happen. Support means that I have the support necessary to make that happen, because I'm not good at everything. And sometimes I need people to remind the people around me that I do have the authority to tell them what I want. And they don't get to say that's not what I want. Responsibility, which is what we're going to talk about today, means that I have to be responsible with the funds that are given me. Um, and we'll talk about that more later. And confirmation means that the people around me confirm that I have the freedom, authority, support, and responsibility, and help me do what I need to do.
Thanks,
Is that
Tina.
good?
That's perfect. Let's move on. Okay. So we're going to dig in more specifically into what the law says the definition of the responsibility principle is. And we're going to break this down. So I'm going to read it very slowly to make sure our interpreters can follow. Responsibility includes the ability of participants to take responsibility for decisions in their own lives and to be accountable for the use of public dollars and to accept a valued role in their community through, for example, competitive employment, organizational affiliations, spiritual development, and general caring of others in the community, in their community. So let's move on to the next one, and we're going to really go more specifically into this definition.
All right. The ability of participants to take responsibility for decisions in their own lives. The participant chooses, with support from family and other people, where they live and who they live with and who supports them. That means if I don't want someone in my home, I don't have to have them in my home. And if I do want someone in my home, you don't get to tell them they can't be there. I get to choose what I do each day. We get to choose where we work, what and when we eat, and who we spend time with. We get to choose how we spend our SDP funds and our personal funds. You can guide us, but you cannot restrict us or tell us we can't do that, because I have the right to make mistakes. And if I choose to spend my money a certain way, if you have warned me that there are consequences and I choose to do it anyway, guess what? Consequences help me learn. I may not believe you when you say you won't be able to buy groceries tomorrow if you spend that money for fast food today until I try it the first time. And then I realize, wait, I don't get to eat the next day because I made a wrong choice.
Thanks, Tina.
Doesn't mean you get to let us starve for a whole week, but you know, within reason, we have the right to make mistakes because our brains, everyone's brain is hardwired to learn from their mistakes. And if you think about it, people who don't have disabilities learn that way. Young adults move out in the community and they spend their money on date night instead of spending it on groceries, and then they suffer the consequences and they learn from their mistakes. We have the right to learn from our mistakes and the responsibility to make better decisions when we understand.
Thank you, Tina. Next slide, please. So the next phrase in the definition of the responsibility principle talks about being accountable for the use of public dollars. So, what are public dollars? Public dollars are state and federal government funds. So, you should know that in the self determination program, the services that people purchase, the services, supports, and goods that people purchase are paid for with taxpayer dollars through state taxpayer funds and federal taxpayer funds. So, as we are thinking about how we are participating in the SDP, we have to remember that we have got to be keepers of the program and that this is a public program available to all people in the regional center system. And we have to always be responsible for these taxpayer dollars. So what does that mean more specifically? So here's some ideas that we have is that you have to follow the rules set out by the state. So you should know that sometimes the rules are very unclear. Sometimes they're changing, and we're going to be talking later about how things are changing. In fact, probably within the next 2 months, things could be changing very substantially in the SDP. And whatever those rules are, we are required to follow them. Um, Even though it doesn't say this in current law, we want people to be reasonable about what they're purchasing, and how much they're paying people. So, like, what does a reasonable standard look like? We're going to talk about that. So we also have to be accountable for ensuring the staff who are billing time are actually working the hours that they bill for. So that means you're responsible for approving the timesheets from your staff and saying, wow, did they actually work from 2 to 6 p.m.? No, they didn't. And then you go back and you ask them to change their timesheet if they got it wrong. You also have to ensure that invoices that you get from service providers are for services that are actually performed for you. Um, and so we're going to come back to this a lot more on this accountability piece. So let's just keep on going through the definition. Next slide, please.
Okay, we have to accept a valued role in our community. That means if we're able, we need to gain competitive employment. We need to get involved with organizations like DVU and others and do our part to voice and advocate for things that need to change. We are responsible for our own spiritual development and for getting involved and being a part of our community if that is something we wish to do. We're supposed to generally care about other people in our community, which means if we're not really able to get employment, we might look into volunteer opportunities or other kinds of things that we can be involved in the community, like when there are, right, when there are, I forget the name, when we go and tell the politicians what you want, what's rallies, when there's rallies, or when there's letter writing campaigns, if we can't write it ourselves, we can ask someone to help us. It's my responsibility and your responsibility to be a good employer, to treat staff with respect, and to make sure they know what's expected of them. It's important to ask for what you want and need and not assume that people know. You need to make clear employment. I forgot the word, Judy.
Yeah.
Job
Competitive.
descriptions. Job
Oh,
descriptions. We need to have clear job descriptions, and we need to tell people when things aren't working so that they can learn from their mistakes and not make the same mistake again. Because it's not fair if there's a chore chart and you ignore the chore chart when it's your shift and then the next staff comes in and has extra chores to do. That's not fair. And it's my responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. That might mean reminding the staff what their responsibility is, or letting them know that they didn't do what was expected of them and that they are expected in the future to do it right.
so that was great. And I want to just add one little comment here before moving to the next slide. So that means that if you're a participant in the self-determination program, you should not be using all of your funds to sit at home all day and play video games, even if that might be your choice, because of this responsibility principle that you are responsible for the general caring of others in the community. And what does that mean? I have friends who pick up trash at the beach, and I have friends who deliver meals to older people. And I have friends who are active members of their churches and synagogues, or they join a hiking club. I mean, your role is to be a responsible member of your community, and and I'm really hoping that people are thinking about that as they're thinking through what their person-centered goals are.
Judy, I would like to add something. This does not mean that we're not allowed to play video games. In fact, we have that choice. It means that we need to make good choices and not spend all of our time playing video games. Does that mean you get to tell us what to do? No. But it does mean you need to encourage us. Sometimes you can get volunteer activities at church. Sometimes you can find about things in your community. If you live in a place like I do where they have a clubhouse and they post things,
Mm.
go check the postings every once in a while. Sometimes there's people that need help. But it also means that if you are capable of playing video games, you should consider a mentorship with one of the companies that teaches people how to create video games because you need to, like everybody else, attempt competitive employment.
Mhm. Thank you, Tina. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to get more specifically into what does accountable for use of public dollars means. So, um, I can tell you that um, that there are very specific things that that the state of California is looking at in regards to this principle. So you're responsible and you're accountable for paying your support staff something that is a reasonable and competitive rate. But it doesn't mean that you should be paying people ridiculously high amounts of money or ridiculously low amounts of money, right? We need to be reasonable about what we're paying our support staff. We also need to be accountable for the types of things we buy with the SDP. So we hear stories of people, buying super expensive types of equipment, whether it's technical equipment or sports equipment, that are unreasonable to use public dollars for. There is also, we have to be concerned about overtime, that you have to ensure, because you're responsible for public dollars, that you're not using so much of your funds on overtime because you have to make sure that you're not going to overspend your budget. The other thing that is critical for you to think about in the responsibility piece is that if you are 1 month away from the end of your budget year and you find that you have tons of money left over, there's got to be a reason for that. It might be that maybe you started slowly at the beginning of the your budget year and it took you a while to find the services or the staff that you needed. And so therefore you have the money left over because you didn't use it at the beginning. And it could also mean that you don't need that all that money, that your needs are being met with the smaller amount in your budget. You should not go on a spending spree. You should not be like, oh my God, there's $50,000 left in my budget and I have 1 month left. I'm going to buy everything in the universe. Like, that is not responsible. And there is going to be pushback from your FMS and your regional center on that. We also think it's part of responsibility for you to be less dependent on your independent facilitators. We know that people need that, particularly people who are new to the program, are relying on their independent facilitator to help guide them because the rules can be very confusing. But as you go on, you should be taking over a lot of the roles of the IF that they were doing to be able to direct how you're spending your money. Finally, I would say to every person here, to all 243 of you here in this audience, if somebody saw if the public got access to your spending plan on how you're spending your money, would you have any concerns? Because if they are going to see things that would be, in my opinion, like unreasonable, then you need to change the way you're running your self-determination program. I call it the LA Times test. If the Los Angeles Times got a hold of a story of somebody who purchased something outrageous or who paid people outrageous amounts of money, that was way, way, way above what people normally get paid to do that job, using public dollars, what would the LA Times report about it? And so these are the reasonable things that we're trying to get through to folks about, because you're going to hear that the state of California is going to get down on the self-determination program in the next 1 or 2 months. And we all have to tighten things up before they get to us. All right, next slide, please.
Judy, I would like to add something.
Yeah.
Being less dependent on your IF doesn't mean that you still don't have needs. For instance, I don't do math, so my IF makes sure that everything balances. So I do need my IF. However, I don't rely on him as much as before because I use the internet to look things up myself.
Mm.
And I don't ask him to ask for things that I know I can't have. And I listen to him when he says, it's not a good idea to ask for that. I feel like you might consider saving up some of your money to do it yourself. And I found that there's empowerment in that.
Mhm.
If I want a specific thing and I save up the money for it, nobody gets to tell me I can't have it.
That's right.
Nobody gets to say there's not enough funds for that because I saved the money myself. I go to my representative payee and I say, look, I have a problem or a desire that I want to take care of. Will you help me save up for it? And they will put a little bit more money aside every month until I can afford it. So, an example of that would be exercise equipment. I don't ask for exercise equipment. I have thought about getting a tricycle because I think I could actually ride a tricycle where I couldn't ride a bike. But my IF said it wouldn't be a good thing to ask for because they might be worried about my seizures and because I have a job and it's not that expensive and I could save up for it. So I am saving up for it. I'm also saving up for a helmet to make sure I don't bust my head open. And in the meantime, I walk my dog because that's really good exercise. And we have a public pool in Ukaipa, and during the summer, I go to the public pool. It doesn't cost that much. It's like $2.50 for the day. I don't need someone to pay for that. We have, I lost,
Oh, it's okay. Can I go on to the next example, Tina? And then maybe if it comes back.
please.
Okay, no worries. Um, Classes in the community. So there's all kinds of classes in the community. And so I do think people need to think about you have these funds, and what if they were in your own bank account? What if it was money that you earned that you got to spend on your own? So you would probably go out and say, I really want to take a cooking class in the community. But should I, if I were paying out of my own pocket, would I take the class that's at the local community college, which is not that expensive, or would I take the like super gourmet class that's $150 an hour? Like you have to think reasonably, like what would I do if it were my own money? And that's always the question you should be asking. What would I do if this was my money? And so you want to think about being sort of responsible as you're identifying classes. Now, let me be clear about the term reasonable, because I saw somebody asking that and saying how subjective it is. It is absolutely subjective. But I think that there are some things that the vast majority of people could say is unreasonable. A good example is if somebody asked to put a swimming pool, an in-ground swimming pool in their backyard with federal and state funds. I think most people would say that's an unreasonable ask. Whereas, asking to join the local YMCA, which has a pool, that's a reasonable thing to ask. I also think that you could say, I want an exercise bike. And what is reasonable is to say, I'm going to buy the exercise bike I can get for a pretty decent discount, or I've decided to join a gym where they have a bike, versus paying $2,500 for a high-end Peloton with a family monthly plan. I think most people would say which one is reasonable and which one is not. Tina, do you want me to talk about independent facilitator rates or would you like to?
Um, I'm gonna let you talk about the rates, but then I have something to add when you're done, and then I'll
Okay.
do the staff hourly rates.
Okay, great. And I realize there is a typo in facilitator, which is my fault, and so I apologize. Um, so let me let me tell you about the independent facilitator rates. It is not something that you decide as a participant. You are looking at different independent facilitators and you ask them their rates. And sometimes those rates are reasonable to do certain things for you. So, give you an example. If they're coming into your IPP with you and providing advocacy support to help make a case for you to get a to get to meet, have your all your needs met, or to argue for certain things in your spending plan that are very important to helping you meet your objectives and your outcomes that you hope to reach. That's one rate. But if you're using an independent facilitator to do much more simple things that could be done honestly by other kinds of staff, you may want to think about not using your independent facilitator for that, or asking for maybe two different rates from your facilitators. Say, how about the advocacy and the development of like the the spending plan, which is very complicated, that would be one rate. But when you are like just helping me approve like my staff hours, like that shouldn't be at $125 an hour. The other thing you want to make absolutely sure about is that some independent facilitators are not charging hourly rates, even though, by the way, they're required to by state law and by state directive, I should say, because some of them are charging monthly fees, like $2,000 per month, whether they work for you for 1 minute or 10 hours. They're charging you a lot of money. And so it is your responsibility as participants to ask questions of all of your providers, including your independent facilitators. And that is why we're trying to take back the program to own it ourselves and to not be so reliant on our independent facilitators so that we are not, because I've heard from families that the independent facilitator writes up the spending plan for them and automatically puts in like $25,000 for the year for their work. And you don't even know if you're going to need them that much. And then they sort of say to you, yeah, you're going to need it. So you better have it in there. We hear these stories all the time. This is not just a one-time thing. And so you want to be able to understand the program well enough. I'm also going to make a comment about this that we know the SDP is complicated, and we are doing everything we can as advocates, Tina and me, to simplify the program. And we are working with lots of other groups to simplify the program. So we know that once it becomes easier to use, people will be less reliant on their facilitators. But it's your job to really understand as much as you can. Um, did you want to throw something in on that, the IF, or did you want to talk about something else, Tina?
No, I want to talk about the IF,
Okay, good.
not specifically about the rates, but about responsibility.
Okay,
Um, it is my responsibility to do what I can for myself. That means I don't expect my IF to generate all of the emails. My regional center actually listens to me better if I write to them directly. However, it is my responsibility to include my IF in all correspondence with my regional center so my IF knows what's going on and isn't blindsided when a problem comes up. Because they're the one, my IF helps me with the budget and the spending plan. But I also write as much of my person-centered plan when it needs to be updated. We update my person-centered plan every year. Simple things like changing dates and making sure the doctors are right. I do as much of that for myself as I can while corresponding with my IF so he's not doing the same work as well. And that's part of being responsible.
right. So let me move on to staff hourly rates. So we know that staff hourly rates vary depending on where you live and what the needs are. So we are doing everything in our power to ensure that the state of California does not declare rates for our staff because we know how bad that would be. We also know that, so my son has 7 staff. He lives in his own home with 24/7 supports. And he has one staff member who has been with him for 19 years. Of course, that staff deserves to be paid higher than staff who has been with us for 1 year. So there's the length of service, there's also the length of experience, and there's also the level of need. And so we know that if you live in Silicon Valley, which is the most expensive part of the state, and you have a person who has high behavioral support needs, maybe self-injurious, and maybe require two-on-one, like really intensive needs, it is very hard to keep people in that job unless you are paying them at a higher rate. But we also know that if you live in parts of the state that are less expensive, parts of the state where maybe for a person, sorry, that you're helping a person, supporting a person who has lower support needs, you can probably pay a lower rate for that individual. So as you are thinking about hourly rates, you should be thinking about what is if I were paying for this person out of my own pocket, how much would I pay this person? And I want to take a moment to talk about parents being paid to serve their adult children. So we are hearing that there are parents serving their own children charging 5 to 10 times as much as people who are unrelated to people served are getting. So if the standard rate is $20 an hour or $21 an hour in a particular area, but there's a parent in that same area who's paying themselves $100 an hour to provide the same kind of support for their son or daughter, that is that is going to be targeted by the regional centers and it's going to be targeted by the state. I can guarantee you that that is going to happen. And um, we need to rein that in ourselves so they don't hurt all of us. So they don't hurt people like Tina, like my son, to say, nope, we're going to set a rate and you are not going to be able to pay people more than this rate ever. Because that to me is the opposite of the self-determination program. So really, really, if there's any message that comes out of today, I am speaking to those independent facilitators who are supporting families where this is happening, to parents who might be thinking about doing this. We need to ensure that we are self-regulated. We are figuring things out on our own. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please.
Um, can I
Oh,
add
sorry,
some?
sorry. Go ahead, Tina.
I would like to add that IHSS is often a part of our program. I use my IHSS to help limit the overtime my staff end up with. But IHSS doesn't pay very much. So I don't want the IHSS workers to feel less valued. So usually my IHSS workers also work for me directly. They don't use their hours at the same time for IHSS as for plan hours. And I don't set my rates for my staff super high above the IHSS. I do a reasonably higher rate because otherwise people get upset and it's your responsibility to keep a balance. Your staff have to be happy, but at the same time you have to be responsible. So it's tricky. A lot of things are tricky. That's what I wanted to add.
That's really helpful. All right, so now we're going to talk about why this is important now. And and as I've been sort of hinting at, the state has some very, very significant concerns about the self-determination program right now and the way that it's run. Number one, both the state and the regional centers, and honestly, a bunch of the FMSs, the financial management services, believe that some people are taking advantage of the self-determination program. They don't, when I question them and they speak to me privately about this, and I say, is it a lot of people? Is it a tiny little group? They say that it is almost half they believe are taking advantage of it in some way. So that is a very significant concern. Um, they also are concerned about some of the purchases that are being made right now through the SDP. Purchases of very expensive items, like somebody saying they need a computer to help get a job, and they buy a $5,000 gaming computer, or other kinds of things. The state and regional centers are seeing that hourly rates are higher than what they believe it should be, particularly who family members are paying themselves very high rates, as I said. They are seeing that monthly rates are not tied to hours worked. So that means that you may have a supporter who, or not a supporter, an independent facilitator or a consultant of some kind for you, where they are charging you a monthly fee, and Um, there's no indication that they've actually worked any hours based on those monthly fees. So they are very concerned about that because remember, this is Medicaid dollars and state dollars here. And I can tell you that for certain, because we just got news of this yesterday, for certain, the state budget as of the end of this month will contain a required cut to the self-determination program of $22.5 million in the next fiscal year. That's July 1st to of 2025 to June 30th of 2026. That it will, and then the following year forever, and it cuts of $44.5 million annually. So they are looking to reduce costs in the SDP, and we are doing everything we can to fight back against it, folks. But that we know that we are in this current situation. Next slide, please.
If we don't govern ourselves, the government will do it for us. They will take away our freedoms. They will take away our choices. They will end the program. They will put us in participant-directed services, and they suck. So let's try and govern ourselves. Let's make good choices, reasonable choices that meet our needs. It isn't always easy to get staff. I know that. But we have to offer reasonable rates and do what we can. I know it's not always easy to figure out what the rates should be, but you can do research on the internet and find out what going rates are for certain things. I don't know that there's a list about that stuff, but just do what you can. Don't ask for things like swimming pools if you have a community pool in your community. If there's a YMCA and you can ask for a YMCA subscription, I'm not there sure if that's the right word, but you know what I mean.
Right.
To go to the YMCA, do that. Don't, because if we make big mistakes, they're going to limit our ability to make mistakes, and I don't think any of us want that. The cuts are coming. We're past the point where we can ensure that we can fight it. They're coming. It's just a matter of how bad they'll be. So we need to do what we can because we are the caregivers of self-determination program. And everybody who has a caregiver understands what that means. I'm responsible for my caregivers. And they are responsible for taking care of me. So I have to be a good caregiver to the self-determination program so that the self-determination program can continue to take care of me. But the funds are finite. It's not an unlimited source. And there has to be enough funds for everybody that needs SDP or they'll stop letting people into the program. Our program might have an end date or a date when they stop letting new people in. So make good choices. That doesn't mean you make choices that harm you. You still are responsible to ask for what you want and need. But you're responsible to make. Oh, Judy, I'm having a hard time with words today. What's it?
Make
What's
good
the word?
choices.
What's the word when there's give and take?
Exchange?
No.
Mm,
Uh, you have to make.
it's okay.
You
Compromise.
have to be
Compromise.
compromises. That's the word I'm
Everybody's
looking
putting it in the chat for you, Tina.
I can't watch the chat when I'm speaking. I can't follow it. It's too hard. But I watch it when I can. But yeah, compromise. We have to make compromises with ourselves. Like we have to say, wait, if I want a tricycle and I think I deserve a tricycle, and I say to my IF, Doug, I really need to exercise and I want a tricycle because I can't ride a bike. And he says, well, you have a job. Why don't you save up for it? Put aside $20 a month and eventually you'll have a bike. And then we look online and bikes aren't that expensive. And, in a year or two, I'll have a bike. And, you know, there's a certain um, empowering thing to that. I made a choice, and guess what? When I get my bike, it's going to be the right bike for me. It's going to be beautiful and shiny and green, and I'm going to have everything I need for it, and it's going to be fun, and I'll have earned it. Sometimes we need to earn things to feel self esteem. And I just want to add one of my favorite things about the SDP is that I get to give jobs to people in the community. That's part of being responsible. I make sure I give jobs to as many people as I reasonably can, especially since the Medicaid cuts are coming and people are going to have jobs in order to get their needs met. So think about it. I don't normally schedule my staff for more than 32 hours. That way, if I have an opening because somebody calls off, somebody who's already worked 32 hours can still close that slot. And I don't ever let them work more than 40 hours in a week. And I do that even when I have to travel. If I have to travel and I can only take one caregiver with me, we add up how many hours I'm going to need them for during the trip, and we give away the rest of their spaces so that they're not going to go over 40 hours. Or we do the best we can to let other people work the hours they're normally scheduled for, as long as we don't take away more hours than what they normally would work. So it's little things like that. Like, I try to never schedule overtime if I can help it. It still happens. So just try. And if you if you have needs, you have to tell people what they are. I was drowning. I was so ready to quit the SDP just a few months ago because too many people got COVID and I couldn't cover my shifts. And I ended up being left alone several times by myself. And I'm not supposed to be alone. So I said, I need help. And they helped me get a person to be my administrative assistant, and now when somebody calls out, she helps me figure out what to do about it. And I still occasionally fail to cover a shift even with help. But a lot of time we have another backup person in our community, two of them actually, that are just my friends at church. And they know that we will do everything we can to cover that shift. But if we fail, we will call them at the last minute and I will beg them to come and let me stay at their house or to come and stay at my house.
Mhm.
You have to do what you can.
Right.
Everybody has to do what they can. Be a good caregiver for the program. Because if the program ends, we're all screwed and we know it.
Mm. Right. Thank you, Tina, for that. So I believe the next slide is Q&A. So you can go
It,
ahead and stop sharing. And I know I've seen huge amounts of activity in the chat, Tina. So I'll be in charge of the chat and you'll be in charge of calling people whose hands are raised. So I'm going to start with, because there's a lot of questions in the chat around a similar theme, and then we'll take the first question, okay?
thank
So
you.
there's a lot of questions in the chat around the theme of what is an appropriate hourly rate for staff? And that is where, like, we don't want to say exactly, but we want to say that people should be, it's the reasonable test we know is subjective, but um, it very much depends on the individual circumstances. So a good example is, if you're a person who has low support needs, that basically the person is, they're not going to have any need for special skills. They're just going to be hanging with that individual, maybe driving them some places, making sure they get to classes that they're taking or whatever on time. To me, you need to think like, if this were coming out of my own pocket, how much would I want to pay an individual like that? And where do we live? Like, do we live in LA where it's very expensive, or do we live in Central California where it's maybe a little less expensive. I know it's expensive everywhere in the state. So I don't want to put a dollar amount to that because that's,
And it depends on need. It
yes.
really depends on need.
Yeah, and depends on how hard it is for you to find and keep people in your community. You may live in a really rural area where it's like impossible to find people. So it might be a less expensive area, but it might be really hard to find staff. Good example is Rick Wood, who is also part of the pilot program, like Tina with his son, Davis, and they live in Mammoth where only 7,500 people live. So even well, it's actually a very expensive place to live too, but it's really hard to recruit and retain staff in a place where not a lot of people live. So you may need to pay more than um, than you would even in LA in some cases, because LA has such a big population and there's a lot more people to choose from for staff. But what everybody could say is unreasonable, right? Is if the normal kind of rate that people are getting, we're seeing is anywhere from a little above minimum wage to, let's say, in the 30s, or even, depending on the level of need, into the 40s per hour. Um, and somebody's paying themselves $150 an hour to take care of their adult child. I think everyone could agree that that's unreasonable, right? I think that there's a reasonableness test, and I call it the LA Times test. Like, what if the LA Times saw that? What would they think with state and federal taxpayer dollars? So we have to govern ourselves. If you're hearing, if let's say you're interviewing independent facilitators and one of them says to you, I'm going to whisper this to you, but I'm going to tell you how to keep all the money in the budget inside your family and how to charge the rates that you need to be able to keep all the money of your child's budget. Like, walk away from that independent facilitator. And if you know of independent facilitators who are saying those kinds of things, I don't know, report them to something. I don't know who, but it's like that's not where we need to be. Like, we need to be responsible. These are taxpayer dollars, and we don't want to be governed by the state. But if we don't take control of things, they're going to do it for us. So, Tina, why don't you go ahead and take the first hand up? Can you see the order?
Yes, Victoria, she's been waiting a really long time. Victoria, unmute
Uh,
yourself.
okay. Hi. Thank you for all the information. And I do agree that some people are, because I've heard some people like, oh yeah, let's put this and this and this and this, and their budget is so big that they cannot even find people to work to use up those budgets because they said, wait, I have to keep that budget. And I'm like, if you can't find people, maybe you're just putting all those things that are not supposed to be there. That's what I'm thinking. But my first question is, you said not to be dependent on the IF. Try not to be dependent on the IF. But how do we do that? Because I know I feel like during the transition, I do need my IF. But like once I am once my son is in the program, how do I do it? Am I allowed to still talk directly to the service coordinator or the FMS, or so things like if I want to change the spending plan, do I have to ask the IF there, or is that something that I can do if it's just a simple thing, like for example, oh, I want to add more hours to this person and we can get that money from this service. Is it something that I can do for those things? And like what limitations, what can I do as a parent on things that I don't need the IF for?
Yeah, great question, Victoria. So, and I saw a lot of people asking that in the chat. So we're being able to get rid of some of those questions too. So first, I said it earlier, the self-determination program is way more complicated than it needs to be right now. And we are doing everything we can. We sponsored a bill last year that got unanimous support in the legislature to simplify the program, and it got vetoed by the governor. So DDS seems to remember the governor doesn't know anything about the SDP. He vetoed it on the advice of DDS. the Department of Developmental Services. So DDS is saying, no, we don't want this law that's going to simplify it, and we're not going to simplify it ourselves. We're only going to rein it in. To me, that's unacceptable, which is why we have to be constantly pushing back against DDS for this behavior. So how do you do better? As how can you be less reliant on the independent facilitator? Well, the first thing is you have to come to some of our trainings. You have to go to every training you can on the SDP. And many regional center local advisory committees are having lots of trainings, and you should go to those trainings and make sure you have expertise. Go to our YouTube channel at DVU. We have the recordings for years and years of our SDP Connects, and you can watch them and pause them and take notes and watch them over again to understand how things work. The other thing you can do, and I really strongly recommend this to people, is make your spending plan as simple as possible. Do not see the spending plan as the price is right and you have a goal to spend as down all this money and you're buying all this crap with it. Like keep saying this, stop buying crap with the SDP and start realizing what is it you need to make your dreams come true and to meet your goals. I can tell you for my son, his spending plan is one page and uses 3 service codes. It is incredibly simple. It is staff, and it is like one little class that he takes, and it is a like I think we have like we purchase a subscription of a scheduling program so that he can so all the staff can know their hours. Like that is it. It doesn't mean that that's for everybody. Some people like to take lots of classes. My son does not, but try to keep your spending plan very simple. And if it's simple, then it means changes to your spending plan will also be very simple. And learn, get education as much as possible. And remember that even though you're hiring independent facilitators, not all of them know what they're doing either. Many of them, especially the ones who don't show up to DVU's events, because we always are on top of the latest information. Like this program is changing all the time. And those IFs who come here and go to the meetings with the regional centers, they're the ones you should be hiring because they're the ones who are keeping up on the latest information around the self-determination program. So that's like one of the questions you should ask when you're hiring an IF. It's like, what meetings do you go to do ongoing trainings? All right, let me go to the chat and take another question. It says, Lisa's asking if the FMS only buys what is on the spending plan and regional center approves the plan. Well, they don't approve it, they just review it. How is it that half the people are abusing? I'm not doubting the information, but not understanding. Is it regional center approving things they should not, or FMS is paying things not on the spending plan? So I would say that regional centers, on the whole, don't understand the program. They really do not understand the SDP. And so part of the reining in is also DDS telling regional centers what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. The problem is because the rules have been so unclear all along that regional centers start making up the rules on their own, and they're more restrictive than they need to be. They're more restrictive than even the directives are requiring. So you have both situations where you have some regional centers reviewing spending plans. I'm going to interrupt myself to say something that is important. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the regional centers. The regional centers are reviewing the spending plan and somebody puts on it that they want to buy a computer, but they don't have any authority to say to you, no, you should not be buying a $5,000 computer when a $750 computer would be good enough. And so they don't have the authority to say that. They're going to start having the authority in the next couple months, let me tell you, because of these change, because so many people bought ridiculously expensive things that they're now reining that in, and they're tying the term cost effective to the program for the first time. Cost effective doesn't necessarily mean the cheapest, although the word cheapest is in the definition. It means based on the quality of what you need to get a service or an item, based on the quality that you need, what is the cheapest that gets you that quality? And
Hey,
so,
Judy,
yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to add something. One of the problems is that in the beginning, the SDP program's whole concept was that moving into the SDP would be cost neutral. The problem we're running into is that a lot of people didn't have services. In fact, that attracts a lot of people to the SDP. And so it's been explained to me by someone at DDS that on the average, SDP budgets at the beginning are double what they are in the traditional services.
Mhm.
So they're looking at this and saying this is not cost neutral.
Mhm.
So we need to be careful. They are going to start looking at it when a budget balloons. They haven't said how much of a balloon, but large increases in budgets are going to be scrutinized in the future.
Yeah.
I have been told this by a reliable source, so let's be careful.
All right, let's take another hand up.
Jordan, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have two things I want to add. If you were to have, talking about staffing, if you were to have a staff, or let's say you have a budget, most people have a bigger budget, a lot of people than $100,000 a year. You pay $30 an hour, you're looking at 60% of your budget is going to staffing. That's just at $30 an hour without adding in overtime. If you have, say, I don't know, 8 hours, 2 hours a week, or 12 hours overtime, because you have to have overtime, and including the burden rate, looking at well over $60,000 just alone in your staffing, probably 70,000. That's a big chunk of your spending. In my spending plan goes to paying staff. That's point number one that people need to take into consideration. That's where, so if you have 100,000, you're paying 70, then you're left with 30,000 or something left over for whatever else you want to do. My other comment is that you spoke about computers. Well, when I tell people, I'm helping people do spending plans or budgets, I don't say go out and ask for an iPad or ask for top of the line. I say ask for a tablet. The biggest problem people have in self-determination is that getting their money. Example, you may find one on a Black Friday sale. That's a one-day sale, but
Yeah.
that's, and you may have, say, I don't know, $3,000 to spend on a laptop, and the one you want is on sale on Black Friday, but you don't have access to your money, so you can't go out to say, oh, I see it on Black Friday, I'm going to go to the store and buy it, because you don't have access to your money, and by the time you get access, the sale is gone, or you can't find one on an eBay and go, well, a guy's selling it on eBay, and it's a buy now, and he has a great price, but I got to go through my FMS, I got to get the money, and too late, buy now just got sold, and you don't have access to your money, buy it at a better rate. So FMS has told me just buy from Amazon. I said, yeah, but I saw one on eBay that was a buy now, and you have to act quickly. And they said, well, we can't do it. We got to buy from Amazon. But I can get a better deal and everything. Didn't work out. So I don't have access to my money to get things on sale or get things at a better rate, because I don't have access to your money. And when those things come up during sales or eBays or whatever,
Mhm.
that's another problem. That's a better way to be a steward of your money, is to have better access. You can buy things when they're on sale.
Thank you, Jordan. I agree. That is really helpful. I'm wondering, Kaylee, we seem to have lost Tina. Don't know, maybe her power went out. That seems to be happening a lot in a lot of areas of the state right now, because of the fires, the potential fires. So, if you could try to find her, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna now call on Araceli. Oh, she said her laptop died. So she's coming back in a second. Araceli, you're next. Go ahead. Araceli, are you able to unmute?
They might have stepped away.
Okay, Sandra, go ahead.
I'm
Hi,
glad to
Sandra.
be here, and I'm so glad that this is all being talked about. So one of the things I want to kind of remind people,
Si no
and
podía abrir el micrófono. Mi nombre es Araceli. No sé si tengo.
I did not know that Araceli was starting to speak. Sorry about that. We had two people talking at the same time.
I'm so
Um,
sorry, Judy. My
No, no,
laptop
Tina, don't
died.
worry. That's not,
I
it's not
plugged
about,
it into the wall, but I forgot to plug it into the laptop, so it didn't
don't worry.
charge.
So can we make sure, who's speaking right now, Kaylee?
I don't know anymore.
Okay, so let's, I don't know what happened to Araceli. Let's go back to Sandra, please.
thank you. Sorry about that. So there's a couple of things, like Tina is saying, and you were saying, talking about Rick. We had a self-determination program a long, long time ago that was only state funded, and so the rules about what could be bought were different. So
Yes.
as we floated and merged and realized, I'm not sure where the realization came or if it was we were forced to get federal funding involved, the rules about what we could buy changed.
We were forced.
Okay. So anyhow, so the rules about what we could buy changed. I serve people who were also in the original pilot, and I spend a lot of time explaining to them this is why things changed, because they're like, oh, the regional center said they don't have money. I said that's technically true because the law changed, and if we want to participate in the program, we have to follow federal law. So there's that part. And I think a lot of people coming into self-determination, they hear the glory stories about the old days of the original pilot, and they're like, we want these things too. And so I think there's a lot of that going on. The other thing to remember is that our program is really, really new. 2021 is when it opened up to everybody that was eligible to participate in the whole state. And it still took us to the beginning of 2023-ish to get up to 2,500 participants. So we're still figuring out the stuff. And I think I know we didn't want to use the word guardrails, but without guardrails, people pushed to see how far they could go.
We need guidelines, not guardrails.
I like guidelines. So, but people push to see how far they could go and how wide they could go. And now that we see, oh, this is how wide we can go.
But most of us don't ask for what we know we're not supposed to have.
Right. I understand that, but I'm talking that what we're experiencing is a trajectory of the process of getting here.
Yes.
So the other thing I wanted to say is looking at the trailer bill language pretty quickly, they're talking about getting rid of the ability to say, hey, I have unmet needs. But a lot of the regional centers are equating unmet needs with, we don't have a vendor to provide the service, so we can't meet that need. So I'm kind of not sure how they're going to enforce that. And then one last thing. Yes, our self-determination population spends more of the allocated funds to them because we figured out how, because we went into self-determination. And what we're seeing in the federal side of Medicaid cuts is a lot of the Medicaid cuts are really in anticipation of not spending money because people don't qualify. And I think that's kind of what we saw here and are seeing here. When we see that, statewide, we're only spending 67 cents on the dollar for people in their purchase of service, they planned on that other 33 cents to not be paid. That's part of their budgeting, is they plan on that not being used. And so when the people in self-determination are spending more of their money, it just looks not cost neutral because we're spending more of the money we were told we were allowed to spend.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we have a whole lot of things going on right now, and this conversation today is so important, where again, it's how can we still be self-determined in the choices we make with the stuff we know is coming.
Right.
That's the most important part of this conversation. The nitty-gritty of how much is reasonable is an internal conversation you need to have with you and the person who is actually the recipient of the self-determination funds. Otherwise, let's just, this is our strategy game, is
Right.
understanding what they're doing.
Right. Thanks, Sandra, so much. You know what? We have so many questions. I'm gonna
Yeah, I was
move
just
it
gonna
on.
tell you Araceli's back.
Yes. So Araceli, I'm gonna ask you don't need to do this, Kaylee. I'm gonna ask her to unmute. Okay, go ahead, Araceli.
Buenas tardes. Yo tengo una pregunta. Muchas gracias por este entrenamiento. Muchas gracias. Y mi pregunta es, ¿cuánto es lo que se le paga a un facilitador independiente para transicionar? Mi hija es del norte de Los Ángeles. Gracias.
Thank you, Araceli. So the amount of money for transition is actually set by the state. There is I believe the IF should correct me because I'm doing this from memory, but I believe it is $1,000 or $1,500 to do the person-centered plan. Throw it in the chat if I'm getting this wrong. And then an additional maybe $2,500 to do the spending plan for you. Thank you, Susie. 40 hours of support. It's $1,000 for the person-centered plan, and then 40 hours at a set rate for your supports to transition in. So you don't need to worry about how much it costs because the independent facilitator or the planner should be able to they should know how much they're going to get paid. And just a little bit of advice to everyone is that if you hire a person to help you transition into the SDP and they say to you, if it ends up costing me more hours than what the regional center is going to pay me, and so anything above that, you have to pay me out of your pocket, you fire them on the spot. And you report them to your regional center because that is actually against the policy that DDS has set forth.
That's fraud and extortion.
Yeah. So I have heard that is not a one-time story. I have heard this story many times. So this is happening as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to the chat and I'm going to, because we don't have a huge amount of time left, I'm going to try to get through a bunch of easier questions. So Richard asked, of the $22.5 million reduction, how much is that of the total SDP budget? And in the past year, the self-determination program's line item was about 480 million. So it would be roughly about $22.5 million of that. So it's not a huge percentage. For me, my concern is less about the dollar amount and actually more about the fact that we have been trying to put these reforms in of the SDP for years, and now we're being pushed against a wall within the context of a budget cut. And so now everything they want to change is based on the budget, a budget cut, as opposed to actually improving the program. Another question that was asked, I was told that even if you agree to a budget amount and it seems low, you can always make an amendment request that is easier to amend your budget. Is this true? That is true. It is actually what I recommend to people. Not everybody agrees with me, but my feeling is that if you're arguing over some amount of money to get into your budget, but you have at least enough to start in the SDP, get into the program, and then take the regional center to fair hearing or make make some requests for mediation to try to get that extra funding into your budget, because it's the the question is not about a dollar amount, it's actually about a service. Because remember, your budget is based on the services you receive in the traditional system. So they're not coming to you with a total number, they're coming to you with a set of services, X amount of hours of respite, or X amount of hours of a day program, or tailored day program, or whatever it is. It's the same system as in the traditional system, where if there's services you feel you are entitled to, that you need to meet your IPP outcomes, then you should be going to fair hearing over those items. But it doesn't mean you should like not be in the SDP. And then I feel like there was one other easy question to ask. Okay. There's a couple of different questions of people saying that you can't have more than one rate in a service code, or even one rate for a particular provider, and that's just not true. I personally, my son has a service provider who does two things for him. He provides direct support at one rate, and then he is the staff manager at a different rate. And so and that staff manager rate is obviously for way fewer hours, and it is just when he is doing things like finding people when somebody calls out sick, or arranging for schedules, or interviewing new staff, whatever it is, that's at a higher rate and for many, many fewer hours. And so when he goes to do his payroll, he has a choice of what's called regular, which is the direct intervention, manager rate, and then he has sick and holiday pay. And so it's not true that you can't have different. I know Melissa's saying that some of FMSs don't allow it. Well, I would file a formal complaint and I would get a new FMS, because there is nothing in statute, in policy, that says you cannot do that. And so if they have a back end system that is very narrow and doesn't allow flexibility, then you would rather have a different FMS to support you.
Can I add something?
Mhm.
Some people choose to do it slightly differently. I had a caregiver that had been with me the longest, who I trusted the most, and we asked her to become full-time and do the assistance work. But she doesn't do just two things. Most of the time we have together is we're creating the schedule, answering emails, checking the list of people logging in, because I can't do it by myself. I don't do numbers, so I don't know if it's right sometimes. So we bounce it back from each other. I say, is it this person at this date at this time? And she says yes. So, but I only pay her a small amount more than the other staff. Most of my staff get about $3 more than IHSS pays in my area, and she gets about $6 more than they do. So, be reasonable, come up with things. I also do things to support my staff, because one of the things we failed to talk about, Judy, is it's our responsibility to make sure our staff needs are met. I can't afford to provide insurance, so I make sure that my staff have 40 hours paid vacation once a year, only the full-time staff. And that helps encourage people to be full-time staff. The last time we did my plan, we also asked for paid holidays, because the year before I got left alone on a holiday, and that's horrible. And so you have to work with the system. You have to figure it out. Sometimes you have to fight for those things, but look out for your staff too.
That's great. Thank you, Tina. You want to call on the next person with their hand raised?
The next person on my screen is Nedra McKee. Nedra, can you unmute?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for this this webinar. It's very informative. What I wanted to say is that I am new here with the self-determination program, and I had an IF, but it was costing quite a bit of money to have an IF. And so what I did was I decided not to use the IF anymore, and instead use those funds to kind of go towards, social rec activities that I would like to have for my kiddos. Because the way I look at the program, I'm so excited for it. is that I look at it like, if I was the one that having to pay for these for my children, I want to be reasonable and I want to make sure that it's something that's affordable. So I try to think of the self-determination program in that way, as if I had to pay out of my pocket for it. So that's something that I feel like is really important for, I know everybody's situation is different and everybody's situation is not the same, but I feel like, having like a better understanding of it is going to help go like a really long way. And maybe like hopefully would prevent situations to where, now, the state, federal, whoever is going to come and try to take away what has been worked hard for so many people to get. So that's one thing for me. And then also the other thing for me is that I wanted to know, are there classes that's being offered for people like myself who is navigating the self-determination by themselves to get a better understanding of how it works, the guidelines that's associated with it, and everything that's self-determination? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yeah, so we mentioned at the beginning, and if we could put the flyers back in the chat, please, folks. We are doing a series called Think Outside the Box, a step-by-step approach to the SDP, where we're really going to spend a lot of time on each issue, and really try to help you. I also really strongly encourage people to go to our YouTube channel, where we have years of recordings on the SDP from our SDP Connects in the past. Some of them are more advanced, so you should just look at the title and see which ones might be helpful. So there's also trainings being offered and coaching being offered by your local volunteer advisory committees, and people should be taking advantage of those opportunities.
Can I ask a question, Nedra? Are your children adults, or are they still children?
No, she's back.
They're still children.
Okay, that means that you can be, if you aren't their caregiver, paid to be a caregiver, you can be their IF, not a paid IF. But I would educate myself as well as possible if you're filling the role of an IF. Sometimes places offer IF training. I would take whatever training you can get.
Thank you. Maribel Oliver, I think we accidentally skipped over you. So if we could unmute Maribel. Maribel, are you still there? Okay,
She's still muted.
oh,
There
there
we
she
go.
goes. There you go.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por la información. A mí me está ayudando mucho porque soy nueva en este proceso. Yo quería saber si ustedes podían darme información sobre conferencias para padres, conferencias donde yo me pueda beneficiar. Gracias.
So DVU is having two conferences this year on the self-determination program. One in Northern California in Oakland on September 11th, and one in Los Angeles on November 19th. So we strongly encourage folks to go to those. But I see Allison putting in the chat that there is, for those who are San Diego Regional Center clients, there is one at the end of this month. I've gone to that one before. It's a very large conference, so people can meet a lot of people there. I know last year Inland Regional Center had a conference. There are resource fairs happening all over the place. Be sure to go to your local advisory committee meetings, because sometimes you can get questions answered there as well. Victoria is asking how much our conference is. It's going to be only $50, and that includes, it's very inexpensive. That includes breakfast and lunch and materials. So we're trying to keep it super cheap for everybody to be able to attend.
Sometimes you can ask your regional center to pay for it, but not always. Some regional centers do.
My friend Mulugeta, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for everything, you guys. You were talking about easy spending plan, and it's really, really helpful for me. I really recommend everybody to just go with that. I have one question. My son is going through a lot of health concerns, a couple of health concerns. So the plan we have is dragged a little bit, and we couldn't use everything what according to the SDP. So right now, like in the middle of the year, everything starts coming back, and we are starting to go full force. But now I'm afraid that we cannot use the whole budget. I don't want to just spend recklessly.
Right.
I'm just very concerned about the thing what I have to do, and the thing what I'm doing right now. He is responding to everything. I really, really see the importance of SDP. Some of the things what I never even dream. I see my son doing those things with the help of self-determination. And I'm a little bit, I get free time to breathe with very helpful people around me. I really, really appreciate that. But, do I have to worry about my budget if the year is going to come to close and I didn't finish my budget because of a couple of health concerns? That's my question.
So first of all, Mulieta, I am so thrilled to hear that your son is doing so great in the SDP. That's been the dream that I know I've had with you for your son for many years. So this is important for people to know that it's not the same at every regional center, but at most regional centers, you can say to the regional center, here are the reasons why we did not use our full budget because of these health concerns. Sometimes it's we couldn't find staff, or staff quit on us, or whatever. There's always, we went on a vacation that we didn't expect to. There's lots of reasons that people don't use their whole budget. And at least because you and I are at the same regional center, I'm pretty sure that your regional center will be really good about understanding the health concerns and will be able to renew the budget at the same level, regardless of the fact that you didn't spend it. I cannot say that that is going to be the way of the future based on the changes in trailer bill language that we are seeing. What we're seeing is how DDS wants the first budget for people to go in to be determined. They have removed the ability of people to argue unmet need. But they are silent about how people develop future budgets. So I actually have no idea how this is going to work unless this trailer bill language is changed. And I can promise you that DVU is advocating everywhere, up and down, to try to ensure that this trailer bill language is changed before it becomes finalized. I can tell you that at next month's SDP Connect, we will likely know, not guaranteed, we will likely know what the trailer bill language says. Sometimes trailer bill language can drag on for months and even get into August. But it's very possible that by July, we're going to know exactly what we're heading for. So we are sorry that we are out of time. This has been actually a really incredible meeting, and I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about at the next STB Connect, but I have a feeling it's going to be about this. It's going to be about the changes that have come through in the plan. And we deeply appreciate the hundreds of you who joined us today. And please, for those of you, especially those of you who are newer or who are sort of getting back into it and needing a refresher course, please come to our Think Outside the Box training 2 weeks from today. And go to our YouTube channel to revisit all of these issues. So we want to thank everybody. Thank you, Tina. Thank you to our interpreters and to all of you who joined us today. And we will see you again soon. Take care.